Kazakhstan International Vectors program informs you about international relations, political opinions, economic solutions and social development. The need is our sixth feeling, which often silences all the other ones. Moritz Safir, Austrian satirical writer and journalist. Each sixth inhabitant of the earth lives below the poverty line. $500 million from the state and other measures to combat poverty in China. The poor do not live in Kazakhstan. How the country was able to achieve this? In the world, people who are called poor are those who do not have enough money to satisfy their basic needs for food, water and healthcare and so on. However, poverty is a relative term. The poor live in both developed and developing countries, but the level of their income varies hundreds of times. Less than $2 per day. This is the international poverty line. On the amount of $1.25 to $2 a day live about 2.5 billion people on the planet. Less than $1.5 a day, this is a beggary line. According to the United Nations, 836 million people live in such conditions. Africa and Southeast Asia are the two poorest regions on the planet. The economic stability of the country and therefore the well-being of its citizens depend on many factors: labor productivity, fertility, productivity of land and much more.
For some people, poverty can be due to the geographic location of their country. For example, in Bangladesh, cyclones hit the country very frequently, and so people who have worked very hard to get themselves out of poverty over many years can find that within the space of 1 hour they lose everything.
Poor people do not have either steady income or access to education and healthcare. The results are grim. 30,000 people die daily from hunger and diseases, and this is only about children. But the next 15 years must change the world. This was decided by the UN member states during the Summit on Sustainable Development. In September 2015, in the UN headquarters, an agenda was adopted for the period 2016 to 2030, which is called the Millennium Development Goals. And as you can see on the chart behind me, the goal number 1 is exactly the eradication of poverty. The second one is about the elimination of hunger, and the third is good healthcare, meaning all these are interconnected. Any efforts to resolve military conflicts, environmental programs or programs to improve the quality of healthcare and education are essentially directed to the elimination of poverty. But one of the most important aspects is the issue of employment and income security.
It is not a problem in developed countries as such. Developed countries have solved the poverty in terms of the need to meet basic needs. Where we see problems linked to poverty in developed countries is more in terms of unemployment. And unemployment is particularly high among the youth. And this is a concern because the youth that spends a long period of time outside of the labor market may actually find it quite difficult to get into the labor market at a relatively older age.
However, in the developed countries, this problem has been solved by means of social protection systems. Here, poverty is rather a problem of personal choice or social inequality. The unemployment rate usually increases in times of recession of the economic growth of such countries.
In Asia, fortunately, in the past, there has been very rapid economic growth, and so the labor market was expanding. Now, in the more recent past, we see that economic growth has slowed down, and so unemployment is appearing, I think, predominantly, once again, among the youth and among the rural workers.
In Asia, the unemployment rate is relatively low compared to other regions. Many people are employed in the informal sector of the economy, and in this regard, they may not appear in the unemployment data. However, their occupation allows them to live by one day. The United Nations is trying to eliminate this tendency too. A very, I would say, right and ambitious program was presented on this issue. But the second important question is the implementation, which is not that simple because, you know, it is about the mobilization of various huge resources, and not only material or financial ones, but human resources also. People should understand why this was adopted and why it depends on each of us. A work on oneself, a temporary job, is far from insecure form of employment in which people are working at less than full power, do not bring the maximum benefit to the economy and GDP, and do not have any guarantees. This question can be solved at the governmental level. A social microcredit idea, or rather an interest-free loan granted to residents of poor countries, was embodied to life by the couple Matt and Jessica Flannery. Jessica wanted to live in Uganda and Matt did not want to leave the United States. As a result, the idea was born how to help novice businessmen of Uganda. In 2005, Mr. Matt Flannery has created a website that was responsible for issuing microcredits to people who couldn't get a conventional loan. With the help of the internet resource kiva.org, over the past 4 years, 175,000 businessmen from 44 developing countries, from Togo to Tajikistan, have received more than $71.5 million via microloans. The average loan size is $410, repayment period 10 months and 2 days for raising the funds. This money is enough for small entrepreneurs to buy seeds for the new planting or goods for the shop. At that, the level of non-payment amounted to only 1.8%. Who in India can get the rice for 3 rupees, and how the Employment Roadmap 2020 helps unemployed people in Kazakhstan. Nearly a half of people living below the poverty line live in South and Central Africa. Another half lives in South Asia. In all these countries, the fight against poverty is being carried out not only by international organizations, but also at the governmental level.
So the government sets the policy environment, and it sets a policy environment that enables the business sector to do its business, because the business sector knows best how to produce efficiently, how to drive economic growth, and how to organize economic activity in a way that will create employment and will benefit the people.
Another important role of the state is the development of infrastructure in the country, that is, the improvement of roads, as well as increasing the access to education. Qualitative education helps a person to get a job and escape poverty. China shows high growth rates on poverty reduction. For 30 years, the number of Chinese living in poverty has decreased by 600 million people. The last year, the government of the Celestial Empire has set a goal by 2020 to withdraw beyond the poverty line another 70 million people. $460 million will be allocated for that. The World Bank calls India one of the most successful countries in fighting against poverty. Official poor here are eligible for the assistance in forms of subsidies for food and fuel. For example, when in 2013 the price for rice in the country has soared, the poor could buy it at 3 rupees instead of 40, or in other words, 13 times cheaper than the market price was. Kazakhstan also successfully fights against poverty.
Kazakhstan is also a very good example of having made very rapid progress into reducing poverty, and in fact Kazakhstan has no more poverty by the international poverty line.
The standard of living in the country is closer to the European parameters rather than to Asian ones, the specialists say. The level of welfare of the country and its inhabitants directly depends on the employment rate. In Kazakhstan, where already there are no people living below the poverty line, the government aims to reduce the unemployment rate, which means the income level increase. To this end, the program Employment Roadmap 2020 is being implemented in the country. This program provides social working places for people from the target groups and also the internship for fresh graduates. The program also assumes professional preparation and reorientation for some qualified specialists. If talking about target groups, these are people of pre-pension age, like women who are 50 years old and older, then the youth under 29, people with disabilities, also former prisoners and others. The program includes 3 areas: providing employment through the development of infrastructure and housing services, stimulating entrepreneurial initiatives, and promotion of employment and relocation in view of the demand of the employer. As of the beginning of June 2016, 51,423 people became participants of the program. 50,352 people are employed, of which 10,794 people got social jobs. 620 people received microcredits, and 219 are being trained. Social working places are being created in different companies, created specifically for the unemployed, and are being subsidized by the state. Ardak Akmakanova, visually impaired, has contacted the employment center more than 6 years ago. At first, no one could find a job for her. My major is social sciences. This profession is quite unclaimed, and this was the main reason for employers to refuse to hire me, I suppose. But in the center, I was offered to participate in 3 programs: internship for youth, free training courses, and social working place. Ardak has chosen a social job and thus works as a manager in a company which has been supplying equipment for the disabled people who have mobility problems. Today she has a regular income. Thanks to our chiefs and to the employment center, I have been working here for a year and a half. I was firstly working on the basis of a program, but when the subsidies were done according to the rules, I was hired on a regular, constant basis. The workers of the employment center claim that 70% of those who take social jobs then remain at a steady working place. The same happens with the graduates of both universities and colleges who run the youth practice. Professional trainings, reorientation and qualification increase are also provided to all unemployed people and persons seeking for a job. We train them on those specialties which are in demand on the modern labor market of Almaty city. At most, these are electric specialists, gas engineers, welders and turners. Women usually come to the employment centers of Kazakhstan more often than men. Many of them have long been engaged in business or stayed at home looking after the children. They are also being assisted in finding jobs. We used to train people on the profession of chocolate master some years ago, and 99% of our trainees have become employed. We think that the unemployment on average has a female face.